Luckily, I don't think you can stay very long. I'm actually here to introduce Matt. We have Matt Cooper here from id Software. He's our lead designer on Rage, built on the id Tech 5 technology. So what Matt's going to do is he's going to, give you a basic demonstration of, how our new tools work, how they're integrated into the game. And he'll probably talk for about 30 minutes or so. Sometimes Matt talks longer. And then afterwards, Matt will hang out right about here. And then if you have any technical questions or want something answered better, just come up. So we won't do like a big audience kind of question and answer session. So I know you don't want to listen to me talk, so I want to introduce Matt Hooper.
Thanks everybody and welcome to the id Tech 5 demonstration. The first thing we're going to start off with is showing the Rage video again. A lot of you saw it, but you can see it on the big screen again. It's a lot of cool stuff in there, and it leads directly to what I'm going to talk about with the id Tech 5 technology and the tools. So if Robert could come up and start that for me.
You want forgotten man, but I have to tell you, you're the long road ahead. And even from the tech side, we've done a couple of tech demos at E3, but we're always kind of skirting around the Rage issue. And remember, that's just the key. There's a lot of stuff online, a lot of people guessing about a lot of different things. Half of them wrong, half of them half right. But there's a lot more to come, and there's just a lot of cool stuff in the game. So today is all about showing you the technology that drives that video and our internal project. But it's actually more far-reaching than that. Because of some of the things that John and the other programmers are setting up is actually working out really well, we think, for licensees. And it's been doing this a long time, and we've run through a lot of the same problems that a lot of other developers run through. And if we can get this first PC running here, I can actually break into this. Another note about the trailer is everything in there was actually in the game, rendered by the game. That's all real gameplay. That's me shooting the pistol at somebody. All of those zombies, they might look really cool, like they're post-processed or something like that. That's straight out of the engine. And the same thing with all this today. We're really proud that we actually have it running at a real good frame rate on all 4 platforms. And that's the Mac, the PC, the PS3, and the Xbox 360. This one's been the biggest challenge for us, but we managed to get it up and running, pretty fast and at a pretty smooth frame rate. Again, at kind of preview stage, we still have a lot to do. So even though we think this looks really great and it's running really well, I think we'll go leaps and bounds beyond that in the future. Another big thing about this is, and this is all based on the feedback we got from E3. First of all, like John mentioned in his keynote last night, everybody would look at the PCs and the Mac, like, oh, that's kind of nifty. And then they would, 360, that makes sense, it's kind of like a PC, but they were really overwhelmed by it running on the PS3. And a combination of that was they were really kind of astounded that we're able to compile all compile the code base across all of the platforms in about 5 minutes or so. So there's it's not a port, and we don't have to do anything special. And the other kind of cool thing, I joke about this a lot, but a lot of the artists up until last week didn't even realize we had it up and running on those platforms. And the cool thing about that is they don't have to realize that, because we've kind of, with the virtual texturing, with our mega texturing and the landscape texturing, we've kind of removed those constraints from the artists. They're literally allowed to use as much textures as they want to create these kinds of landscapes. And it'll just show up across all the platforms. Another really cool thing we have going for us, and we've always done this on the PC, so we take it for granted that we have it now on the consoles, but the artists can go into Photoshop or whatever tool they're comfortable with using. You know, they can go into Moto, they can do Mudbox, but we use just about everything, Max. They can actually go in there, adjust their asset or create a new asset, save it out, and just do like we've always had on the PC, reload models or reload images, and it'll instantly show up across all the platforms. And again, the feedback we got at E3 is that's a big deal. There's no packaging it up, there's no compressing it down, there's no doing anything. It just basically is going to show up. That kind of instant feedback is always what's allowed a relatively small team to do these AAA titles. I'm going to show a couple of things with the texturing here on the PC version I can break in. And again, this is actually one of our environments from Rage. So that it's not like a typical tech demo where we're just showing you something cool. I can actually, get in here, switch it from the AI, take over, start driving, knock that guy around. And at any time, I can actually switch back and let the AI take control here. I can go back to the looping camera, but it's not just a video or a demo here. And if I switch around a couple of different views, this, for instance, two of our goals when Tim Willis and the other designers were talking about what we wanted to accomplish. It's always done the indoor environments really well. We like doing that level of detail that you've seen in our games. And it's a big deal to us, and we're going to maintain that. But the reason we chose this environment is because it's something a little different. But we still managed to get this kind of large-scale detail you see here with giant cliff faces and boulders. And you don't see a lot of procedural stuff, although we could use that if it made sense. But you can go from these giant boulders all the way down to a pebble level, basically. It gives the artist enough freedom where he won't be embarrassed if the player hops out of his vehicle and wants to walk around. Because a lot of the things we're planning in Rage actually call for that level of detail. So all of this, like these bones, and I'll show you in the tools how we kind of get to this level of detail. And again, here you can see a lot of large-scale detail, giant boulders, stuff you would expect in a modern racing game when you're zooming by. But the thing you wouldn't expect is you can actually get out and go right down to the pebble level again. And this entire terrain, even though we chose the setting, it's basically a desert canyon kind of valley. If we wanted, because of the way John set up the mega texture, every single pixel can be truly unique. So if we wanted to go from a desert to an oasis to a snow-capped mountain to a lava-filled volcano, it doesn't matter. The artists are literally tasked with making great art instead of in the past worrying about how many new textures they can introduce. And I know that the alarm bells are going off. How in the world can anybody texture a world this big? But again, the tools that I'll follow up with will kind of show you how we do that. And of course, we still have all the nifty effects, like here's a little depth of field I like to show off. You kind of see the detail that we have in some of these cactus and foliage. And there's actually a lot. If you pay attention around this track, I think we have 100 or so actually 3D, fully animated models here with a lot of interesting detail. And of course, all the fog. And I'll show some other really cool post-processing effects that are giving us, I think, a leg up visually. Again, all the vehicles, this is actually AI driving around this track. They do that thing pretty well. Okay, now here I am, and again, I'm hopping around here for the sake of the demo, but the player can just drive a car and get out anywhere and explore the world, basically. And I think that's the biggest thing that's driving us right now, is just that ability to have the vehicle kind of be your avatar, and then you're able to drive anywhere, see something off in the distance that looks kind of cool, drive up, get out the car, and then walk around, and still have these kind of extremely detailed indoor environments. Decided to throw the vendor in here. And if you see, if I zoom in really close here, you can see it's what you would expect out of it. All the detail that we would normally have with our characters. We're not getting rid of that. We're not totally, departing from what we normally do. We're just adding on top a lot of different, cool elements. The one thing this game will never do is get stale. I guarantee that. So again, like I was mentioning before, it's really not very good having the ability to completely, uniquely capture an entire world. And again, this track actually uses a 64 by 64K landscape texture, but some of our wastelands are actually 128 by 28, so that's like 4 of these, combined together. And the actual physical distance that you get to travel with all the roads and walking up tiny little paths it's actually a challenge for us to take advantage of that much space to add the gameplay, but it's turning out pretty well so far. So again, having the ability to do it is one thing, but having the tools to take advantage of it is another thing. So I'm going to jump over to the tools machine and kind of show you how we get to that level of detail. This might look vaguely familiar to everybody that's worked with tools in the past, but the big thing is we've moved from our traditional level editor, and then we've had these other kind of archaic ways to add text files to do animations and things like that. But we have tools programmers now that have created this id Studio environment. So in our actual office, we use it for a lot more than just content creation. We actually have it completely integrated with our source control, even down to my to-do items. I can just come in here every day, make a list of the things I need to do. It's all integrated into our task and bug systems, calendars. We have an information wiki for the game. Just a lot of cool stuff that's helping us out, and it's quite the departure from what we used to do in the past. We still have the world editor, and I'll pop into that later and show you that it's still fully functional. We're definitely going to use it, and it's totally necessary for some of the things you do in game design. But on top of that, because of the modular nature of the editor, we've been able to add anything we want. The animators now use this tool, the landscape painters use this tool, and it's all being evolved again to meet the needs of our internal project. So it's not just an engine and a tech demo. This is actually works really well for what you want to do with this technology. And you'll see here, this is the biggest addition, and this is the terrain editor. It has I kind of call it a combination between Photoshop and then one of the 3D professional packages, because we have some model tumbling and some of the things that the artists like out of those programs. But then on top of that, we've added this kind of we have stamps and terrain tiles, and I'll show a little bit of that in a minute, but it's almost like this palette the artist can choose from. And if anybody uses Photoshop, you end up setting up these custom brushes, or you get this system just the way you like it. So we've kind of given the artist what they want to best take advantage of creating this. So again, we have, I would call it 3 different ways to get to the level of detail you're seeing in the track there. The first way is the artists are allowed to take giant pieces of geometry in whatever tool they're comfortable with. They can use Max, they can use Lightwave, Modo. We have a bunch of guys using a bunch of different things. So they just create these giant, I call them mega geometry tiles, and whatever the tool allows them to build. And they can put a totally unique texture on top of there, which means this giant boulder over here can have the unique bump map that matches and the diffuse. So you get these really cool large-scale details, and that's extremely important when you're racing by in an environment like this in a car. You need to see those kind of landmarks in a game. Then on top of that, we have this tiling system, and this might look familiar because other games actually use this this system to do their entire terrain. You can see the dimmer areas when I move to the tiling system. Those are actually some of those mega geometry tiles, as I like to call them, with their unique texturing. And John takes all of that and builds the base of the mega texture. Then on top of that, I can come to this tiling system. The artist gets a little brush like this. He can come choose through these tiles that we built up over time or make new ones. There's no limitation here, but he's not actually editing individual pixels. It's much easier than that. I'm going to probably make this look ugly because I'm not an artist, but it'll give you the idea. So I can take this, size it up to any size. I can kind of scrub out an area. Let's put some grass in here. Then I'll update that. Yes, and then I'll find the button to move back to the preview mode. And you'll see what I've done now is I've replaced the existing tiles with this kind of grassy texture. And there's no limitation to that. Again, the artists are free to use whatever they want. If they don't like that grass texture, they can go and make a new one. If they wanted something totally different, they can do that. All of those limitations, now basically we don't have to rely on artists to be good optimizers as far as it comes to surface texture. They can just be good artists. And it's worked out really well so far. We've actually had one guy build this entire terrain, and this is while we're developing both the tools and figuring out what we want. But he did it in about 2 man-months, as John said, but he could probably redo it in a significantly shorter amount of time. Then on top of that, you can see it left what we call these stamps on top. And again, originally, this was nothing. It started out as just one tile texture. But if I move to the stamp delete mode, I'm not going to delete any of these, but you can see me hovering around with all the different types of stamps that can be stamped on top. And if I move to the stamp palette and choose something like, let's do some graffiti because that's nice. And I'll choose this danger side, go to stamp mode. They're able to scale, rotate, and there's no limit to where this can go. They can stamp the full, there's basically a couple of different ways, and we're adding new ones all the time as the artists need. But the normal mode stamps both the diffuse, the bump map, and everything about that particular material. But you can come in here and do cool stuff like let's add just the diffuse at 50%. I'll try to stamp it across these bones here. So you can see what it did was tone down the diffuse, leaves the bump map that was already existing, and kind of stamps it right over there. So it's a layer on top. And there's no danger with screwing up because you can undo really quickly. Like I can take those off. And all of the stamps, if I go back into stamp delete mode, all of these are saved forever. Anybody else can go back in here and edit these stamps. So unlike a Photoshop file, if you flatten it all and forgot to save all your layers or something like that, this is always saved for us. And we can actually have multiple artists working on completely different parts of the terrain. As many as we want. I mean, it works better if you pick a section, but we could throw one artist on this corner over here and say, hey, the player has to get out and look at this ruined, car and search for some goodies in there. And then we could send another guy near the start area and start working there, and they can just work simultaneously. And one of the really neat things is that everybody else who's playing the game, we can actually be driving around the terrain and see these updates as we go. And not only on our PC or our development systems, you can actually see it across all of the platforms. We usually keep these set up every morning and make new builds, but if somebody goes look at the PS3, they can see it being updated live. We even have guys that work at home over VPN, get some pretty successful speeds about having it update over that distance. So let me show a couple of other neat things. There's a few more options in here that I think are really cool. I won't be able to get the most impressive use out of this, but I think just seeing it will give you an idea of what they can do. If I take the bump only, let's take something really obvious like my little test stamps here. Go to the stamp mode. The artists have the option to, let's see, scale it up a bit, rotate it, find something that's bumpy. Let's go right here, stamp that down. And what it did was take only the bump map of this new stamp and completely erase all the bump map information that was underneath. And again, this is not the best example of that, but they've been able to, for instance, this area here, this didn't start out this way. The artist actually went in and created some very convincing bumpy rocks sticking out of what used to be a flat surface. And they're finding all sorts of neat ways to use that. And you don't, just these preset options is not the limit. We're adding the ability to recolor diffuse on the fly and all these other neat artist-driven features that would allow them to basically use this palette that we built up and without creating new art, relatively quickly go in and completely change the way an area looks without too much trouble. There's actually a good example of that in here. I kind of like to show this off because this was one of the design requests. When we were choosing this environment to show for our tech demo, what we wanted was to add the vendor in there because we knew people would be, okay, yeah, that's fine, that's a nice outdoor area, but can you go into an indoor area and still have that kind of detail you guys usually do? So we added the vendor in there, and he's in here. And we asked Jean, the guy who actually created this mega texture, to go in here and make something like a parking lot. And it started out as just this rock here. It was literally a rock there. And what he did was come in, and again, this all happened over 10, 15 minutes. While I'm up at my system working on something else, I'm seeing it get updated, and I was pretty surprised. But if I go into tile mode here, you can see he chose a bunch of these different concrete tiles, kind of just brushed them around, added that, and then on top of that, got a pretty good base. And then if I go into the stamp delete mode, you can see all of the stamps he laid down, these cracks and things. And he didn't even have to be that careful about it. It's amazing the results you can get by just throwing down all these different cracks and things. And he was able to make a pretty convincing, parking lot situation exactly like we asked for. And it happened, like I said, all in about 15 minutes. Of course, he threw in a couple of nice models just to sell it. But I think that will make people more comfortable about exactly how you get to that level of detail. It's not some totally foreign concept for artists. They get to work with their little palette system, and it's pretty comfortable for them tumbling around in this editor here. And there's a ton of other options in here, like the ability to hide the models, show the models. We actually have a bunch of different lighting options, and this is something that I'm sure some of you noticed. Some of the darker areas, it didn't necessarily look that canyony, but right now that's what John is spending a lot of time on. We have the ability right now to move through different shadow qualities and get some pretty neat results. For instance, this pole here, you can see how the shadows kind of attenuate away from the base, and you get a lot fuzzier as it gets far away. So we have some pretty good shadow options now, but we will eventually have full radiosity and a lot of different options to add to the artist. We can also use one sunlight or multiple lights. You can add as many lights as you want and kind of have it bake in with a really good looking, because it's done offline. But instead of waiting for that, a lot of the artists will work in this kind of quick, fast shadow mode. And you can see even at full resolution, the artist can really quickly just lay down stamps. Another really neat thing too, I think this is really cool. I don't have an example, unfortunately, but at any time the artist can come and change the resolution. This is a 64 by 64K. They can change it from 2K to 128K and just rebuild the entire thing in a lower resolution. And you'd be surprised how well a lot of the large-scale detail holds up. So some of those resolution choices and different things like that, we can make those decisions later on in the process. So again, it's all about letting the artist concentrate on making good art and trying to get them these tools to do it. Now again, as I mentioned, this is id Studio, so it's more than just a terrain editor. This is the biggest departure from what we've done in the past for the specific need of getting these large landscape environments. But we also have everything from the articulated figure editor, sound editor, particle editor, GUI editor, material editor, even a state editor, which may not ring a bell to you guys, but anybody who's made a game would realize the value of this. We can load up a level in this engine view here. It can list all of the different entities that are active and show you all of the initialized variables. You can step through them. It's just a really handy tool. And I know a lot of you are more interested in just games, but trust me, all of these things I'm talking about here are going to be the reasons why we can get you better games on time and not have to wait for the PS3 version to get done. So all of this will serve a lot of benefits for you guys beyond just development. Another neat thing, and this is something we didn't have in previous engines, is the animation editor. Again, it's all about the comfort level for the artist, and we continue to improve these, weekly. But this is a timeline editor, something they're familiar with. They work with Maya with these things. But the cool thing about this is everything's driven by the engine. So it's very much a what you see is what you get in the actual game. So they can feel confident about what they're doing here. You can go through all the different animations here, preview them. We use a lot of mocap, but they'll clean up the mocap and then get it in here and then just start editing. You can see down here I have this is a frame command, but at any point in any of these animations they can drop new frame commands. And for people that are not familiar with frame commands, that's basically the ability to add sound, muzzle flashes, even trigger world events, all of the things that you need to do with animations, footstep sounds, all of those things can be done through here with preview ability instead of opening up some archaic text file that we don't want artists messing with in the first place. There's a lot of other cool stuff I'll just touch on, but all of the blends and the transitions, like from one animation into another, are handled in here. Channel groups, which I don't even know what that is. I can put a pistol in this guy's hand. Let's give him the Colt 45 in his right hand. And you can tweak these values to make sure it's right with him. You can put the rifle, whatever you want to do there, and then go back to previewing the animation. We have the beginnings of a lip syncing tool in here. But it's just really handy for them. It makes us all a lot more productive to have this type of tool development and have guys whose sole responsibility is to get this stuff fixed and add new features. Speaking of new features, I'll show you something cool. Let me open up. I'll actually open up the little town that we saw at the beginning of the video there. And again, before we were kind of hamstrung with this, it was Radiant, and Robert Duffy did a great job with it. It did what it did really well, and it was very effective for what we did in the past. But now, with this whole modular system we have set up and in studio, we're able to, bug the tools programmers to add stuff like this environment editor. And he literally threw this in the night before we went to E3, and that's Andrew Welch, our tools guy. He's somewhere down there. So he's responsible. What this started with was the artists, because they drive a lot of these kind of visual things, but they asked for a way to add some post-processing. And it's basically at no cost to the engine, so John was, I can give you that. And then we had one of our other gals, Gloria, who's responsible for just making cool effects, which is something I've always wanted, so I'm really happy about that, because I'm a sucker for cool water and just neat-looking effects. So Andrew took the idea that Gloria implemented and added this environment editor. And like I said, it's basically an overnight thing. And then the artist just went crazy with it. Again, this is no impact, no cost to the in the engine. They can do whatever they want, but you can see all the cool effects you can get. You can come in here and adjust the fog, and then they can save this out. And a neat thing, we think we're going to get a lot of leverage out of this in the game, because all of this can be done dynamically. So you can dramatically change the environment in an area if the player goes back into town and there's a big dust storm going through. We can, have it modulate from one setting to the other, or just have these subtle little things that'll add to the immersiveness of the scene we're trying to create. And John had a neat story about this mega texture here. I'll retell it because I think it's appropriate. But all of this, the landscape down here, again, this was all done by John. But we started a little late. I think he spent a couple of days on this. But I'm going to mix up John and Sean. Sean is the guy who actually has been working on the mega textures. Sean is. He's the guy that talks for 3 hours. But as he was working on his little test map, I actually created him this same test map, but before the mega texture was even started. And it started out as, I think I can show it here. Let me go back to the normal setting here. It started out looking like this, just a basic tile system. And again, as I mentioned before, this kind of shows it a little better. The artist can just start with this and start painting around and get a really good base. This has no preset geometry. They can choose to use that, but in this case, we didn't think we needed it. So it started like that, and as John is doing his testing, he started noticing all this cool stuff just kind of popping up before his eyes, and so did all of us, and it's really neat. And we don't have to worry about how far the artists go. It's basically how far Ken lets them go. But if I go to the stamp delete mode, you see, I think he actually covered up some of the initial cardboard with other cardboard, so there's stuff you're not even seeing here anymore. But it just gives him that freedom. He can literally just go down and just start stamping away. And again, we'll continue to improve this area, but we have really good results. This came together really quickly, and part of it is due to the tools we have here. Another thing, of course, we have is the world editor. Anybody who's Radiant is probably going to be familiar with that. We've enhanced it a lot, and I can't even tell you what's different, but there are a lot of things that are different, a lot more stable. But if I go in here and open up, let's see, open up the distillery map, which was also in the video. Don't check it out. It still has all the things that most people who've used this are going to be familiar with. It still has the real-time preview. So you can still go through the area and feel pretty confident about this is the way it's going to look in the engine and across all platforms. You can still do things like to be honest, we've been moving more and more to having mostly professional 3D packages make most of our geometry, but it doesn't minimize the usefulness of the editor because a lot of the clipping, a lot of the AI placement, a lot of the light placement is still handled through here because it just does it really well. But if you choose, you can go here again. It's just like the palette system I was talking about for the terrain editor. Let's choose this texture. I can still drag out a brush. All this fundamental behavior is still in here. I can still pop down a light. I can come in here. Let's change the color to something beautiful like purple. Let's preview that. Wow, that's really ugly. But we still have all of this. So it's really the way you want to see the game before you do that last compile and get it in there. But again, we're big believers in what you see is what you get. I really think it's why it allows us to be so productive. So you can still lay out brushes. You can take these models. Anybody who uses Radiant out there, I'll show you something. At least this is really cool to me, but it may not ring true with everyone. We've added this kind of almost Windows Explorer-like, but the ability to add to group anything, lights, brushes, just lights. You can have them in multiple groups, but you can have all of these things grouped and then, do complete moves of grouped objects. And it's sort of like layers in Photoshop or anything else. It's just a really comfortable way with organizing all of this. Another neat thing you can do with this, let's see. We added a little 3D preview and get you a lot better top-down view of what the actual, for laying out AI and stuff, this is really helpful. I can see the floor surfaces, add my clipping. But if you can come in here and you can ghost a section, which if I go back in here, so you kind of graze it out. And anybody who's ever used this knows that this is extremely helpful because now I don't have to worry about selecting this, but it's still in a view. I can also completely hide sections so you can work on just different layers at a time. And you can take complete layers, of course, and transfer it to another map. So that's worked out really well for us. So the entity inspector, again, this is going to be one of those things that's kind of hard to understand, but if you were using it, you would realize the importance of it. Every time a programmer changes an entity, all of the information instantly shows up. So we don't have to worry about screwing the wrong values. And most of them are limited to, for instance, if I go in here, let's see. Add a new model. Let's choose something like this barrel here. If I try to come back in and change the model, you don't have to type it in because we always mistype it in anyway. But you just come in and choose another model. That's a little thing, but it makes a big difference for us. And all of the environment settings, this is actually kind of cool. Work in all of the different render views. I don't know how useful this is, but I end up getting some cool looking stuff in here. I'll show you another thing. Let's see if I can get this working. Again, I'm a designer, so if I ruin some of the stuff I'm not supposed to be touching, you'll have to bear with me. Let's go to the GUI editor. I come here and pick, let's use our E3 main menu. It's pretty handy for the initial layout of GUIs. Doom 3, there's not another GUI system that's been used in the game that was as robust as that one. The unfortunate thing is we had one guy who actually had to go basically text editing it all because we just never had the time to add this little nicety here. But what you can do in here is, let's see. Get a little more space here. There we go. So they can quickly lay out the buttons and then go into the actual, open up the GUI file and edit what these things do. I hope I don't save this because this is going to be a mess for somebody here. But this is another one of those little things that's going to make a big difference for both us and licensees. It's just really handy. And it's all part of the same thing. So everybody comes in the morning. They get the start page coming up. It tells them what to do. Then they go in there with what we hope is a comfortable tool for them. If not, we adjust from there. And they're able to get their job done. And it's helped us out a lot. All right, let's see if I'm missing anything else here. Particle sound, AF, console. So I think that's basically it for the tools. And again, I can answer questions. You guys can come up after, or however we want to do this. I'm not sure how we're running on time.